Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's me, the Lou D-O-double-G, and with me always my beautifully, wonderfully, sexiest co-host, the great Boom Slang. How are you today, Boom?
I'm good. I'm a little warm currently. My room is on fire.
It is on fire. He does live in,
I think aside from that, I woke up immediately, had an exam, laid down for like maybe 30 minutes, went outside to work, came back inside, took a shower, went to my first class, finished my first class, went back outside to work some more for like 40-ish minutes, came back inside to shower real fast, scarfed down mashed potatoes and meatloaf, and then got into my second class that then ran till like 6:15.
Nice. Riveting stuff. Boom and I are both
I'm
still in
tired.
school. Yeah, no, I
I'm tired.
understand. I totally get it. It's very taxing on the brain, isn't it, to do Zoom classes? I have my fair share of Zoom classes. Mine are all in the morning, thankfully. I don't have any in the afternoon, but
Yeah, for whatever reason. Well, I feel like with online classes, for me at least, it feels like the effort didn't dissipate from like the live classes. It just kind of shifted into different things.
no,
So my effort
absolutely.
would end up being in the prep beforehand. Like, am I clothed? Do I smell all right? Have I eaten? And am I there?
Yeah, no, for sure. For
For
sure.
the
It's
Zoom,
very different.
do I have internet? Do I need to have my camera on? How many notes am I going to have to take down? Am I on time? Is my professor going to show up?
You've had that problem, haven't you, Boom?
I've had that problem.
I've yet to have that issue. But yeah, man.
Oh, people just kind of joining the Zoom class without being a student. That happened today, actually. My professor was so mad.
That's never happened to me, actually. That's
He went on like
wild,
a
dude.
tirade for 15 minutes after he kicked them on how upset he was that it happened.
Holy shit, dude, that's fucking insane.
He was so mad. Like nothing happened, right?
Of course,
Like
of course.
this dude just like had it was like a picture, I guess, held up to the camera, and I suppose he was waiting like to be called on or something to do something, but nothing ever happened because my professor didn't notice him for like the first 40 minutes of class, but when he did notice him, he just kicked him and then proceeded to be upset about it.
So then no damage was done. It was just a little goof and gaff, you know?
Oh, no, yeah, his pride is definitely hurt though. My professor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's get into the Geek Gourmet stuff we do. What the Geek Gourmet meal, our gourmet meal of news. So, a thing that caught my attention immediately as the news broke was the fact that Xbox, to continue off of our last podcast, bought Bethesda.
Well, specifically, they did not buy Bethesda outright. They bought their parent company, ZeniMax,
Thank you for clarifying that, Boom. Yes,
who
so
owns
that
a bunch of different companies, including Bethesda.
right. So my first initial reaction was, holy shit, if Xbox has bought Bethesda, are they going to make
Lockout.
Fallout, for example, because I play Fallout, a exclusive Xbox game, right? That was
Bro, I
my
was ready to
initial
cry.
question. I was ready to be like, dude, I am not about to buy an Xbox just to play
Well, because
Fallout.
my whole thing is they bought every company under ZeniMax, right? And so that's
Of course.
every company that Bethesda Publishing publishes, not just
Mm-hmm.
Bethesda GameWorks.
Of
So
course.
that includes id Software, that includes the developers of Dishonored, that includes the developers of Rage. There's a lot of franchises under there. I mean, in Bethesda Software has the Elder Scrolls series and Fallout
Which
under them.
people love Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, people have been begging for Elder Scrolls stuff. I mean, we're not going to get that for another like 5-6 years, easy.
Yeah, at the very least, it's gonna take a hot minute.
Because they're still doing what was it, Space, Starfield.
Yeah.
And so my whole thing is, because I had woken up to this news, right? I woke
Yeah.
up to this news, and it's like 15 minutes ago, Xbox announces they bought Bethesda, and I'm like panicking in which is my woken up days, scrambling for press releases and answers because I wanted to know, am I gonna have to buy an Xbox just to play Doom and Fallout and eventually
Elder
Starfield and
Scrolls.
Elder Scrolls 6? But thankfully, the answer is no, at least not yet.
Right.
because Todd Howard, right?
Yes, Todd Howard.
He released a comment about the whole thing, saying that the deal between them and Xbox is still pretty much the same as it was before, but it's just the whole thing is more centered around having all of the games that ZeniMax's child companies produce out on Game Pass day one. That seems to have
Interesting.
been what drew them to make that transaction, not necessarily exclusivity. And that makes sense, right?
Of
Initially,
course.
it sounds, oh my god, the world is burning down. Xbox is taking my beloved games from me. But it's not going to end up being like that because, and if you think about it, the whole reason Game Pass went to PC was because Xbox did horrible sales this generation. I think for every PS4, I think for every Xbox, there was like 4 PS4s.
Yeah, yeah. It was something along those lines. I remember that.
Terrible numbers, horrible numbers. And so the issue was that because nobody, well, I say nobody, but very few people got Xboxes proportionally compared to owning a PS4 or a Switch or a PC. And not to say that like you can't own multiple, but
Right.
people excluding Xbox from their TV stands, that
Which I'm one of those
they
people.
weren't. Yeah, same. They weren't making the kind of game sales overall that PlayStation was, right? They were doing terribly. So they made the move to PC by extending Game Pass over there to bolster sales. If you own Game Pass, they get money and you get games on your PC.
Which is what
It's
I've been
not
using to
exactly.
stream Halo Reach and now Halo 3. So that's fine with
Exactly.
me. And you know what I wonder
So
though?
you're happy and Microsoft is happy.
Right, cuz they have my $15.
Yep, every
But
month.
you know what I wonder though is if this is going to set a precedent for in the future to have exclusively games come out on Game Passes, or I mean, you can still buy physical copies of movies, for example, right? Like you can still do that, even though Netflix is out and Hulu and stuff like that. But I wonder if we're gonna turn into a world where it's exclusively like that, like how it is with movies and TV shows, but with video games now. How we're gonna just stream things and stream play them, or download them to your PlayStation, play them as long as you have the subscription. Or we're kind of doing that now with PlayStation Plus, for example. Like if you,
So when you say that, you mean like in the way that Disney Plus handled the Mulan and Onward releases?
yes,
Don't like to answer your question. I don't think so.
you
Just
don't think so?
because they're wildly different means of entertainment. For a movie release, you got to go somewhere to do that. For a game release, you pre-order it digitally or order it out from Best Buy or Walmart or Target or something. And then you'll
Right,
get it shipped to you day one. That's what I did with the Super Mario 3D collection.
right.
I pre-ordered it day one from Walmart, and I got it the same day it released. It was like a non-issue, pretty much. So I don't think that would end up being the case, only because people do like getting physicals if they're that kind of person. I mean, some people just like the all digital, which is something to think about when PlayStation numbers for like the number of PlayStation consoles that they're like have in stock, like that they have in stock for this holiday season, the PS5s. Retailers generally have only been getting maybe about a third or a quarter compared to the full disc in systems. It's like a 25-75 split.
Okay, which is a huge chunk of money anyway.
Yeah, so it's weird to say. Well, it's weird that they would make that decision to make drastically less digital only consoles.
Understood. Yeah, yeah, I understand what you're saying. So, with that being said, though, we are moving into a very digital world, right? We're moving into and I guess this pandemic was is a big reason as to why we have things like Mulan coming out on Premier Access on Disney Plus, right? As time goes on,
Yeah, that was whack.
if we move if we move out of this pandemic, then I guess then we'll see, right, if we end up getting less of that and more of things going back to the theaters and stuff like that.
But we are in like a once in a lifetime event that's gonna drag on for longer than any of us would like it to.
Of
So
course.
nobody's in any shape to be like making any kind of decision in confidence.
No, absolutely. And I think that's just what's going on right now.
Yeah, and that's just kind of generally. But with Disney specifically, if you'll notice, and this is something that some other people had noticed yesterday, I think,
Yes.
that the is it Falcon and Winter Soldier or Winter Soldier and Falcon?
Something like that. That there's a lot of stuff going on with that show, but yeah, continue.
So they removed the release date
They did remove it.
from advertisements. So either it's a mistake, right? These things happen, or they plan on moving it and haven't decided yet. But they know that they're moving it, so they've removed the release date.
And that's kind of interesting because I'm gonna tie this back into the Bethesda thing, right? Because we have you mentioned that we have Xbox acquiring Bethesda so that it could be a part of the Game Pass, right? And so that you could get these games in the Game Pass day one, right? And
Yeah,
so
free, quote unquote,
for yeah,
because it is the 15 a month.
yeah, you are paying for it, and so I think it's interesting to again do something like that because even in the pandemic you're still able to do something like that, right? Like you're still able to be like, "Oh, it's out on Game Pass and it's going to come out this day." Because you can still access it from home and you don't have to go anywhere, right? So I
Yeah.
wonder is if when we're talking about movies and television in the specifics Disney Plus, if we're going to get a kind of, I guess, a differentiation between these shows, right, in terms of how they're released, and if it's going to be in a sense of, are we going to do it in, I guess, what's holding it back, right? Is it filming? Is it editing? Is it the pandemic? With all of that together,
Well, filming is one thing.
right? Because
Right.
if in the middle of a pandemic, like I mean, come on, you can't really
I mean, look what
do a
happened with the
whole lot.
Batman.
I mean, yeah, we mentioned a few podcasts ago that Robert Pattinson had um COVID, and so that obviously impacted the filming of the Batman. So now that we're moving into this conversation of the Falcon and Winter Soldier, or whatever, wherever the name is, it's like, well, how is Disney going to, I guess, in a sense, make a move so that hype doesn't get lost, right? But also marketing stays, which it seems like they're still trying to market things even though they don't know the release date. I guess it's just a conversation and a question to be had, a question to be asked about how is Disney going to move forward in terms of, because obviously Mulan didn't do so hot with the premiere access. And now we're talking about a show, right? We're talking about a show. So this is very different, right? I would assume it'd be addressed the same way that The Mandalorian was addressed. But in terms of movies, obviously Mulan didn't do so hot. And no one's going to want to pay $30 to go watch Mulan on Disney Plus. I'm sure people would either rather go to the movies and pay $10 or just straight up not watch it at all.
Yeah, because there's
So,
a lot of problems. I mean, even with the price point,
right, the price point is insane.
and I mean, and it's different between different circumstances because 30 is already after you're paying, it was like 10, 15
$7
for.
without ESPN and Spotify.
So
So
let's
then
say it's the full 15, including.
Hulu and ESPN, not Spotify, excuse me.
Yeah, let's just assume it's the full 15
Okay.
because a lot of people are going to end up doing that to save money.
Of course.
So 15 on top. So
Yes.
15 nets you the privilege of giving them 30 more dollars.
Right.
So now you've hit 45. How many tickets does that cover?
Yeah,
Let's say in a
absolutely.
big city, 15.
Mm-hmm.
15 for a single person before the snacks and drinks.
Yeah.
15, 30, 45, not including tax. That's before tax. So you have 3 people to show that movie to at the very bare minimum to break even before tax,
Yeah.
before snacks, and before drinks. Let's say you get drinks.
Yeah.
$8 a drink a person, $15 food each person. So you can take it from 2 different angles. You take it from the angle of, oh, well, I would have actually spent way more money going to the theater than me and my 7 kids, let's say, all sitting on the couch
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
Mulan instead. I didn't have to pay for anything. They ate sandwiches here at the
Right.
house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or you live by yourself, or like which is maybe one or two other people you split expenses with in an apartment or just in your home. That's when things get a little shakier because you're already there at the Disney Plus. You've already paid 15. You're already
The
giving them
Disney
money.
Plus.
You're giving
Yeah.
them more.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
so
so
I understand both.
like there's a I think there also has to be a way to get your movies out there in the midst of this pandemic and your games, since we were talking about Bethesda earlier. There needs to be a way that is feasible for the company first and foremost, right? Because they need to make their money back, but also so that people are willing to pay this money, because I know of one family that bought Mulan, and that's it. Just one out of everyone I know.
What, me?
So it was your family, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's it. That is literally it. So I think it going forward, I wonder what Disney's gonna do with that, and I'm actually very interested to see how they adjust their system. We're gonna move on to one of the biggest things that Disney has just announced, released, whatever you want to say, is the Wanda Vision trailer, and I have feelings about it. But boom, I know you were super excited to talk about this. So how about you kick this off for us?
Looks like it's gonna be House of M in some
Mm-hmm.
degree, right? Because it's obviously not the original story where she rewrites all of reality to
Yes.
be ideal for mutants. From the trailer, the first time I watched it, I thought like nothing of it. I thought it was going to be a completely original story, right? Because nothing clicked. But afterwards on Twitter, I saw people were talking about House of M, and I was very confused, though I saw what they were talking about, and what they were talking about was this quick scene where I think it's Wanda pouring wine, and in
Mm-hmm.
French, the bottle says House of, and then a big long French word that starts with the letter M. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do, but translated, it ends up being House of M, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then people were putting two and two together with Vision waking up that lady in her car up and kind of like restoring, I guess, knowledge or something. Kind of puts him in the spot that Wolverine was in the original House of M storyline, where he was the one restoring everyone's memories of the original reality. And so what it's pretty much boiling down to be is House of M, but with all the mutants stripped out of it. This is still Wanda, in a sense, using her powers to manipulate reality so that her and Vision can have their ideal reality.
Right, which
Right.
I think is alluded to that in the beginning of the trailer more so, and then at the end when they're kind of in this white picket fence almost looking house. I feel like that alludes to what
Yeah.
Western culture views as the ideal home, right? And I think it's
Like the nuclear family.
right, right. We see that a little bit of that like in the beginning of Fallout 4, for example, right? Like that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And so
And yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting take. It's very tragic, even obviously not watching it yet. It's very tragic, the idea of them even being together, because there's a good chance it may not work, because she's a human, he's a an android, and these are just things that like are obvious to people. But I think it's important to play on those facts, right? It's important to play on, I guess, that story, because then if it's done the right way, it can be very sad, it can be very drawing. And of course, we're getting something that hasn't been touched on yet in the previous movies, which is Wanda's ability to warp reality, right? We've seen bits and pieces of it, but we haven't exactly seen her full-fledged go out there and warp reality, which I am personally excited for. I would say, truthfully, I am most excited to see their dynamic, Vision and Wanda, and see how that plays out in terms of their relationship, whatever it may be. I'm assuming it's, a relationship, right? But I'm excited in terms of story to see what they've cooked up over there at Marvel Disney headquarters and what they've brought to us, because like you were saying, House of M is more so with the mutants and X-Men. But obviously, in this reality, in this timeline, or whatever you want to call it, there are no X-Men. So,
What I think is so I have a theory
okay.
because there's also a lot of other visual Easter eggs in the backgrounds
Oh,
to lead
absolutely,
us to
yeah.
believe that. In like you could pick this thing with a fine tooth comb and have that thing filthy by the end. But
Mhm.
there's stuff like what looks like to be like a child's art project on the fridge, and it's like this. It's literally just a brown letter B, which is the first letter of one of their kids, Billy, who ends up being Wiccan, one of the Young Avengers.
Billy, yes, yes.
And then there was a part where there's like a room with two cribs, and so I mean that's both of their kids, both Wiccan and Speed, both Young
Yes, Speed.
Avengers,
Yes, yes.
which could end up tying back into the Ant-Man movie because from what we know right now, it's also going to be a Young Avengers film.
I'm very excited for that. But yes,
And I don't know like how is this going to like end, right? Because obviously Vision is dead.
right.
However, even in the comics, Wanda and Vision did not conceive naturally, right? Android.
No, absolutely right.
She conceived through magic. So it doesn't matter whether or not Vision's like even around. But I'm wondering, because obviously the big thing with House of M and the reason why people love that story so much, aside from the kind of like mutant utopia thing,
Right, right,
was
right,
towards the end of it was no more mutants.
right.
So what's gonna be the big,
No
I
more
guess,
X, Y, and Z.
yeah, what's gonna be, well, maybe like not even no more, but what I'm thinking is this the way that they introduce mutants?
Okay. Oh, my phone. I'm glad you
So
said
instead
that.
of
I'm glad
no
you
more
said that.
mutants, more mutants.
So this is something that I wanted to bring up as well because when you're looking at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and holistically, if you include Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Defender series, we have the movies influencing the TV shows, right? Like the movies exist within the TV shows. Now,
Mhm.
the TV shows as of now don't exist within the movies, right?
Correct.
You don't hear anything about Daisy Johnson. You don't hear anything about Matt Murdock. Like nothing like that.
Yeah. Canonically, Coulson is still dead.
Right, right, right. So then I wonder if they're going to make the TV shows as equally as important to watch as the movies are.
I think they are. And I say that because so remember how we were supposed to have the Ghost Rider show? Sort of.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
What would have because the whole thing was that they were going to reboot the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider from Agents of Shield. But if Agents of Shield was already not canon, what would be the point of rebooting that version of Ghost Rider if not to make him canon? You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
even in like minor senses, we might end up getting the Hellstrom twins, like even as like name drops or small cameos in the Doctor Strange movie.
Which
Hellstrom and Satana.
and which is interesting because the thing about Agents of Shield, and we'll talk a little bit about it, is that when you start it and like kind of in the middle of it, it's very obviously tied into the movies, right? It's very obviously like as
Yeah.
the Winter Soldier happened, for example, it was a huge thing within Agents of Shield because obviously Shield is Shield.
Right.
And so that was a huge tie-in, but I feel like as time goes on with the movies and the show, they become less and less
They
intertwined.
split.
Yeah, they become
And you
something
realize
totally
this
different.
at like the most around the Infinity War and Endgame
Right, because you
era.
could tell they're kind of gearing up for something different at this point, and they
Yeah,
obviously
one did
don't.
not affect the other.
They obviously don't know exactly what it is that was going to be, right? But
Right.
they obviously wanted to keep that line open, so to speak, so that they could have creative freedom wherever they wanted to go. Which maybe, and here's me, I guess reinforcing your thoughts is maybe they were waiting to see if the Fox Disney merger could happen before they put their pin in anything. And so I wonder if that's the case. And so now that they're like, okay, we have mutants now we can go ahead and integrate them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think is a fantastic idea. I think we need to have the mutants in here because then why else? What's the wow factor that's going to bring people back, right? If you're just seeing the same heroes, the same shit all over the place.
And I mean, I'm glad that they're doing Young Avengers.
Right. No. And I think that's great. But the thing is that in Young Avengers storyline compared to the X-Men, which do people know more?
Oh, it's going to be X-Men.
It's going to be the X-Men because that's just I would say in terms of comics, they're on par with the Avengers, right? So then I think that the X-Men are going to be the wow factor that brings people into those seats at the theaters, right? So I'm going to speak for myself here, and obviously, Boom, you speak for yourself. But I am excited to see where this goes. I personally hope that at the end of this, we see some signs of mutants. Because although Wanda is a mutant, her and Quicksilver's situation in terms of licensing is very different, right?
Yes.
They are not children of Magneto in this situation.
Yeah, they're technically not mutants at all.
Because they were made from
the Hydra
experiments, correct? Yes. So
I think they're called enhanced.
Yes, enhanced. That's what they called them at the end of Winter Soldier in that cutscene. So who knows? I'm gonna definitely be watching it, and the cool thing about it's coming out around Christmas time, so that's gonna be really cool.
We know if it's gonna be weekly? Or if it's gonna just all in one go.
I was actually watching some videos about it, and the assumption that everyone's having is it's gonna be weekly. But
okay,
again, we'll see. I mean, I prefer it to be like Netflix where it all just comes out, but you know,
which is another conversation entirely.
You were right. We'll back off from that for now. But in this Marvel conversation, I wanted to bring up something that we bring up with DC a lot. So when we talk about DC, we can't help but be like, oh, it's shit. It's terrible. It's done things for us that we're not happy with. While on the other hand, I don't want to... Right. I don't want to let my viewers or listeners think that I have a hard-on for Marvel. Right. That I think everything Marvel does is fantastic. And Boom can agree with me here. Right.
He likes DC.
Yeah. I love DC. DC Comics specifically are my favorite out of the two. But I'm talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe in this situation where I don't want anyone to think that we think that anything that MCU does is amazing and is top A1. So I want to bring up some things that I personally don't like and Boom personally doesn't like about these movies so that we can kind of keep the balance between being like, we have our issues and in DC, but we also have them with Marvel. So, Boom and I don't know what movies we're going to tell each other that we don't like, okay? Our least favorite Marvel movie. And we're going to talk about a little bit why we don't like them. So, I'm going to open up the floor to Boom so he can tell me which is his least favorite. And then I'm going to come back and say my least favorite. And we're going to surprise each other with what they are, honestly. So, Boom.
Well, we could also not surprise each other.
We know each other pretty well, so we're
both go hammer the same movie.
we're pretty like-minded, I think, with this stuff. But go ahead, Boom. You tell me your least favorite one.
Thor: The Dark World. It was so bad.
All right, Boom. Tell us why you think it's so bad.
Mostly, it was because of the uninteresting writing. The dialogue was really terrible. I was bored the whole time. Malekith was done so dirty. So dirty. I love Malekith. I like the Thor comics. Big fan of the Thor comics.
Yes.
And Malekith is just one of those center stage Thor villains.
I think, I would say that
he's pretty critical, like aside from like Loki and Hela, and I want to see more of Gore the God Butcher, but he's not like a core.
No,
Malekith, not only has he been around for a long time, he's the leader of an entire race.
Yeah.
How did they fail to make him intimidating?
Right.
even after the whole "oh look, I killed Loki" thing happened, and then it wasn't like actually like Loki dead, but we find that out later. Like even after that, I still
which
didn't
was
care.
which was
I still
honestly
didn't care.
one of the better scenes, but that's even like the bar is very very low, honestly, with that movie
Yeah,
specifically. But anyway, I'm sorry,
and
continue.
why was the ether just kind of the Galactus cloud from Fantastic Four, but red?
Right, because in other instances it wasn't the cloud, right? It was I mean it was a stone.
Yeah, it's a stone.
So yeah, no, that
And
was
I don't
confusing.
I mean, I haven't seen this movie more than once, right? I saw it the one time that we saw it together on a bus trip,
You and I saw
and
that together. When did we? What trip was that?
it was
I brought all my movies that day, that time, and we just
yes,
popped movies,
yeah,
and
and
that's what happened.
we just watched a bunch of movies back to back. I think it was, I mean, it was a field lesson. I don't remember which one
Yeah,
it
because
was
you
though.
and I would always sit next to each other mostly during those
I think it was
freshman year,
the
the Austin one.
what was it?
It might have been because
No, you know what? It was sophomore year. It was sophomore year.
that makes sense. Yeah.
That's the one. I remember now. But aside from that, my other problems with well, I guess I'm gonna keep digging into Malekith because this has to like goes in hand with more of
Yes,
my problems.
absolutely.
He looked terrible. He didn't look like Malekith. Malekith has like that split look about him,
Yeah, he does. He does.
and they didn't convey like the one visual thing that makes Malekith stand out from other dark elves. Why? Like the way they distinguished him from the other dark elves is he wasn't wearing like their mask, and that was kind of it. Because all the dark elves kind of wore this white mask, but he didn't for most of the movie. He just kind of looked weird.
Yeah. So I think something that I actually want to bring up because you brought up the way he looks in the comics, and I searched it up because I remembered him having this kind of, so yes, he's split, right? Like he's different colors on both sides of his face, but
Yeah, it's the red and the black,
yeah,
and then he's blue and black on his
yes,
skin.
yes. So what I find particularly menacing about him in this picture specifically that I'm looking at, and I'll put it up on the screen, is he looks like he has this Joker-ish smile with his hair free flowing wherever. It almost makes him look very like aggressive but like wild, like an animal almost.
Yeah, and that's like
Yeah.
his level of like treachery and malice and ferocity. He
Yes.
is in like every sense a Norse trickster. And I mean he's he's not the same as Loki, right? But Malekith is more classic Loki now than modern Loki is, because modern Loki's had a lot of growth since classic Loki.
And I'm glad you said growth. I am so glad you said growth because I'm gonna jump in here real quick with this movie because it's on my, it's not my least favorite, but it is on my one of my least favorites.
Hmm.
Thor as a character felt like he had no growth. Although the first movie was all about his growth, it did not show in the second one. It felt
Right,
like.
that's another thing that he just kind of it didn't feel like he maybe not like retained isn't the word I'm looking for. It doesn't feel like he's the same character. It feels like they wrote one character for the first movie, which I also disliked, not to like give that movie any credit either. But
Mm-hmm. It was an origin story. There's a lot you could forgive there. Anyways.
yeah, I can forgive a bad origin story. But at this point, they should have picked up where they left off and kept running with it, because by the at least by the end of Thor, we knew we had worthy Thor. At the like, well, this entire movie, Thor's just kind of boring as rocks, and that's the best way I can like put it right now, as I'm like
Yeah.
scrambling for better words to describe how much I don't like this movie.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because Thor in the comics is really, I guess, grounded even for one of the gods, right? And I mean that's the point.
Yeah, because he
Um,
spends time with humans, right?
yeah, he spends a lot of time with humans, and he understands like the difference in scale between a human's world and a god's world. But here, he's still just kind of a fish out of water, and he's floundering the whole time. And it's weird to see him like that because that was already all done in the first movie. We should have moved on from that, and we should have had Thor, like Thor in, I guess, the Avengers game that just came out is a good representation of Thor in the comics now.
Mm-hmm.
But Thor in the movies, I mean, even like the funny Thor that they introduced in Ragnarok, and then continued through Infinity War and Endgame, is not my Thor. Not to say
Mm-mm.
that I don't like that interpretation of Thor. It's just not my Thor, right?
Well,
My Thor is the Thor from Thor: God of Thunder, War
right.
of the Realms. War of the Realms Thor
I was
is
gonna say War of
amazing.
the Realms. Yeah, yeah,
Unworthy Thor.
yeah. Well, and I think,
Um,
and I'll tie this back into my movie whenever we're done talking about this one. Is
mhm.
it's the Marvel thing, the Marvel bug where everything has to be funny.
Yeah, the he hoo hoo ha ha
Poo
stuff.
poo joke, you know.
And I get it. I get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
I
absolutely.
really I get it. General audiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I understand as well.
But I don't know if it's worth butchering the complexity of a character where by his like character's nature should have a god complex, but is more grounded than most of the humans that he's on the team of the Avengers with.
Mm-hmm. I
Like
agree.
Tony or the
Who's a
Hulk
well, Tony's a
or
different story, but yeah, no, he's Tony.
um
Tony acts like he's a god himself, right? Like
yeah, it's like this opposite thing.
who versus the actual god,
I
right?
either of yeah versus like that the literal like born god, either of the Ant-Men that have been on the Avengers, or whether it's Scott or Hank.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're like, I mean, not to say that the Avengers are bad people, right? But some of them do have like these over the top god complexes.
Well, I mean,
Banner to an extent is like
I'm
that, not
I
necessarily even the Hulk.
I mean, though, it's just like any type of workplace, though. You have
No,
those
yeah,
people who are like that. You have your some bosses who think they rule the world. Like that's just life. But
yeah,
it's how you integrate the story. I feel like, and how the
yeah,
direction goes
exactly. Not to
into
say that they're
acting.
like bad characters or
Yeah,
anything,
no,
but
absolutely.
Thor in the comics is an integral part of the Avengers
No, yeah,
because despite him being a Norse war god,
yeah,
he's like one of like I mean not to say that the Avengers are like warmongers or anything, but he's always like one of the first people to seek out a peaceful resolution. Because while he will clap a planet, he doesn't want to clap a planet.
While he will destroy your life, he doesn't want to destroy your life. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
and
absolutely.
that gets reflected, and the name of the storyline is lost upon me. But
Right.
it's the storyline where Thor goes to Earth and
Yeah.
just decides to clean up. And I say clean up like he's a vigilante, but he decides to take matters into his own hands regarding Roxxon,
Mm-hmm.
because Roxxon is leading the planet to pretty much cannibalize itself
Yes.
with and it's a very eco-friendly story
Yeah.
because they're pollution and stuff, the earth is dying, and basically what ends up happening, this isn't like an old story or anything. What I'm going to say is it sounds like it came from like the Bronze Age, but it's straight up like within the last 20 years, where the Roxxon lawyers literally make it so that Thor is banned from Earth. They
Yeah.
literally write up a
Yeah.
contract because Thor like broke so and so XYZ law. And so they wrote up like a contract that went like through like the legal system, and they're like, "Yep, you can't step foot on Earth. You are an illegal alien." And so then all this time passes, and then Thor eventually comes back after like millennia, and everyone on Earth is just dead. The Earth pretty much went through like an environmental apocalypse during the time that he was gone, and they all died, even though he was like trying to do the right thing.
So to tie back to Thor: The Dark World, obviously you feel like Thor was very underutilized as in terms of acting, in terms of story writing, and
See, and it's not to say that I don't like Chris Hemsworth, because I think Chris
oh no,
Hemsworth
he's great.
does a
Yeah.
great Thor, and he's a
Yeah.
great actor.
Yeah.
What I
Absolutely.
don't like is the characterization.
Perfect
But I
work.
also
Yeah.
do understand that Thor's transition to being a more lighthearted character, like the way that he is in Ragnarok and Infinity War, especially in Endgame. Oh my god.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Endgame.
Some of it had to do with Chris thinking that Thor was just kind of like a boring character, but I attribute that to just the poor characterization that the writers were like giving him to work with at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first movie, whatever. Thor: The Dark World kind of broke Thor as a character in like multiple ways in the MCU.
Yeah. I have to agree with you. But thank you for sharing that, man. I agree. Thor: The Dark World is a hard movie to watch, especially because we're watching a character we love so much, and we like his storyline through like his comics, so we feel he should be portrayed in a certain way, and this is one of those situations where they were not. Now, in conversation with storylines and characters not being portrayed in maybe a way that we would see fit, my least favorite Marvel movie is definitely going to have to be The Age of Ultron.
I did not see that coming.
Now, here's how I feel about it. Is it the worst made Marvel movie? Absolutely not. Like I would say the first two Thor movies were poorly made. They're not they're not super redeemable in any way. I would even go
Not
as far
exactly
as
cinema.
Yeah, exactly. I would go as far as to say that even God, what movie is this I'm thinking of right now? Iron Man 2,
That
was
was the exact movie I thought you were gonna say.
Iron Man 2 was shit, right? But the thing is that no movie other than the Suicide Squad, but we're not talking about DC or BVS. No other comic book movie other than those have given me such a fucking letdown, dude. And I dropped the F-bomb because as a comic book as a comic book reader, as a bit of a comic book historian myself, I like to, dabble in these things, and I know Boomtoon also does as well. The Age of Ultron storyline is one of those storylines within the Avengers that is pivotal to them as a whole. They learn a lot of things happen in this storyline, and it was a huge event when it came out. So I come into this movie watching the trailer, and let me tell you, that trailer was articulated so beautifully. I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Trailers are an art within themselves, right? Because we got this whole idea that Ultron was saying, the strings are off of me. I'm no longer tied to you motherfuckers. At this point I can only assume Tony, right? Or whoever who had him on strings, right? And he's like, now I'm gonna go fuck up everything you know and love. I'm gonna go do these things because I can, and because I'm upset about whatever's happened to me. Okay? And so the trailer was awesome. I love the idea of Jason Spader voicing him. The look of him was great. Costumes were awesome. Like, a lot of things were going so right for this movie. But then you hit the movie, right? You sit down and you're watching it, and you have Quicksilver that was wasted as a character. You have Ultron, who for some reason is basically a fucking stand-up comedian. And then you have just this poor directing by Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon is one of my least favorite comic book directors because he did what he did with Justice League, which we've talked about it. And if you want to go listen to the Talking the Dome podcast, we discussed a little bit. But he did Avengers. Avengers is not a great movie within itself, but as you heard me say earlier, origin stories can get a little bit more leeway in terms of storytelling, in terms of what's going on, because
as
Avengers,
opposed to the subsequent releases.
Yeah, because Avengers paved the way for Age of Ultron, for Infinity War, for Endgame, for the future Avengers and X-Men movies that are hopefully going to happen, right? Like, that's fine. That's a starting point. But with Age of Ultron, I felt like storytelling took 2 steps back. I feel like it took 2 steps back and just disappointed me. And that's my biggest gripe with the movie, that I was super disappointed in it. Like, I can watch it again. There are moments in that movie that are very redeemable, but there was no wow factor. There was no reason for me to come back to the movie and watch it again. Like The Winter Soldier, for example, I'll watch 3 times, right? I will watch it again. Age of Ultron, if I have to sit through it, I will. But it's one of those movies, man, that there was so much going for it. I mean, Ultron has to be one of my favorite Marvel Avengers villains. Ultron is such
one of my favorite villains.
Yeah, no, so we'll see. I mean, that's the thing, right? And I guess here's the other thing. that I would like to point out is that because Ultron is one of my favorite Marvel villains, Avengers villains, I have this certain bias towards the way I want to perceive him, right? And so he wasn't perceived the way I wanted him to be in the movie, which is fine. But Marvel does this thing where everything is a fucking joke, dude. Everything is a joke.
I just want to bring up that even as he's dying, he's still being funny.
And that
even as he's dying.
And that to me is, you went through all this shit, right? As a team and as a viewer, right? You went through all this literal shit. Well, aside from, let's just pretend that people like this movie, like most people like this movie, right? You dedicate your story into this, your 2 hours or whatever. You go on this journey, and then at the end of it, the death means nothing. That's how I feel about that, because he's all battered and up at the end and messed up. And you don't even see him die. You just see Vision shoot him in the face, and there's like a lens flare or something, and you don't even see it happen. There's no payoff. And even at that, I feel like the Age of Ultron storyline, you have so much to tell that maybe it should not have been an Avengers movie. The second Avengers movie, because truthfully, maybe that movie should have been something that tied in with Endgame, right? Or with Infinity War. Like, maybe that should have been another tie-in movie.
Or even after.
Because even the first Avengers movie ties into Infinity War or into Endgame, right? Because you have Loki working with Thanos and the T'Chari and you have all that happening, and it's even alluded to. Ultron was just never brought up again.
Nobody talks about him until Civil War, when they're talking about the Accords.
But even then, it's all it is Sokovia. All they say is Sokovia. That's it. They don't even say like other things alluding to him. I think they mention his name once, and then the name of the Accords is the Sokovia Accords. But like, he was wasted. My biggest gripe is that Ultron was wasted as a villain, and that storyline was wasted under a bad director, in my opinion, under whatever the hell happened there. There was no
The Age of Ultron storyline name was wasted, because that storyline is fire, and it's just kind of not what the movie was. The movie didn't follow that storyline at all.
I would say that Age of Ultron is on par with the Infinity storyline, like that. That
it
on
is
par.
It like those,
or even on par with Secret Wars.
It's in the the Marvel Mount Rushmore of comic crossover series.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
The Age of Ultron's, the House of M's, Infinity, Days of Future Past, like those tier of stories.
No, absolutely. And that's the reason it's my least favorite, because it was such a fucking letdown. I mean, it was an Avengers movie. You expect the Avengers movie to give you a big payoff, to give you this thrill ride throughout the movie, and instead, I feel like I was just floating, and nothing was happening, like in still water. Like, we had Quicksilver die. What the fuck was even that? He didn't need to die.
Yeah, well, what was the point?
What was the point?
I get that it was supposed to be like, oh, look, Quicksilver. Nope, we took him away from you. Aren't you shocked and surprised?
And
well, sure.
Yeah.
But I like Quicksilver.
Right. And it was also in the middle of at the height of like First Class, Days of Future Past, and when those movies are coming out. And so we had Quicksilver in those movies. So maybe you should not have introduced him at all. Or maybe there shouldn't have been. Maybe there should have been another character.
Did it have to be Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver? Because my whole thing is they obviously brought in Vision with Scarlet Witch, right?
Right.
But then at that point, they're like, oh, well, we have to do Quicksilver too if we bring in Scarlet Witch.
Absolutely. Which I understand that frame of thinking, but here comes the but. You have to also think about what that's going to mean for the audience. Right?
Yeah, the implications of it.
How we're going to feel about that. Because then it was like, oh yeah, Aaron Taylor Johnson, who you wasted as a talent, by the way, Disney. Ooh, great, he's this cool character. I'm excited to see him. Boom, he dies. Oh yeah, Quicksilver was in the MCU at one point. That's it. He's an afterthought. Which you will have your characters like that.
The man had like less than 20 minutes of screen time.
You will have characters like that. You will have, those villains that don't matter necessarily to the big story, which is fine. But Quicksilver is such a big character in X-Men. Why wouldn't he not be a big character in the Avengers movies if you're going to bring him in at all?
Yeah,
So,
even if he doesn't like end up being an Avenger, what was the point?
right. So then, to reiterate, Age of Ultron is my least favorite Marvel movie, and that's because I felt like the Age of Ultron storyline was wasted, Ultron as a villain was wasted, Quicksilver was wasted, and that's my take on it. That's my take on it. There was nothing. There was nothing tragic about the story. It was like, oh, we accidentally made this killer robot. Oh, we took care of it. That's it. Yeah, sure, we messed up a city, but okay. And then that led into Civil War.
Had really temporary repercussions because it was like directly with Civil War, and then they bring it up again in Infinity War. How, oh, why are you working with XYZ? They're like operating illegally or something. And then by Endgame, nobody cares.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously another threat at hand, which is Thanos, but I think Ultron
even by like the time of the future.
Oh no, yeah. And I think
like
Thanos
after the 5 years.
I think Ultron is on par with Thanos in terms of villains, but again, that's just how I feel about it. And I'm done with that conversation. But as always, we're gonna stay locked down here with the news and see as things come out, and we'll talk about things. So tune in with us next week on Apple, Stitcher, Podbean, and YouTube. We post our podcast all there. This is our 5th podcast or 6th. Oh my god, I don't remember. Anyway, we're a handful in at this point. 6th. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I really, really appreciate it, and I know Boom does too. And maybe one day we'll become big enough to have a sponsor. Maybe G Fuel will sponsor me, or like, I don't know, Dollar Shave Club
series.
Oh well, yeah. Dollars. I said Dollar Shave Club. Anyways, thank you all for listening. Bye.
Bye.